Dr. Harry Sachs. He will be giving our keynote lecture for this session on the topic of international medicine initiatives, a new opportunity for your institution. Dr. Sachs is a professor and executive vice chair and of Department of Surgery and associate dean for international programs at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Dr. Sachs has a huge CV and a bio, but to summarize, he was faculty at Rochester, Brown, and Cedars, and he showed me how to do quality. And I think that's what I would say. Dr. Sachs really taught me how to do that, and thank you for your leadership.
Well, thank you, Siva. It's really an honor. When I became the chief at the Marion, Siva was my first recruit, and I may have taught him quality, but he sure taught me a whole lot about how to take care of patients, how to do minimally invasive surgery, and how to be a gentleman. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, and in some ways, I have to say that I feel a bit embarrassed because I'm coming here to talk to you about an organization where we are blessed to be very, very resource rich. And yet when we think about what the organization, the International College of Surgeons is, it really recognizes that we have a significant maldistribution of surgical skills, of medical skills in general throughout the world. And that we have a responsibility to those to whom much is given, much is expected. So I'd like to, in the next 20 minutes or so, tell you a little bit about a very robust international medicine program that we have at Cedars-Sinai. And I hope that I can convince you that yes, we do make money on this program. It's an important revenue stream so that we can provide care. But at the same time, I think that you can both do well by doing good. And so I formerly was on the advisory board of Intuitive. There won't be any discussions of that. I want to cover 5 topics. And some of these may be relevant to your own organization. Some may be something that you should think about. When we think in general about international medicine as a revenue stream or service line, it's about bringing patients to our organizations to provide tertiary or quaternary services, either because of high quality or perhaps because it's not available in their home country. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about what we do to facilitate that, and the scope of what we do is pretty dramatic. The other is that we are an academic medical center, and I think it's our responsibility to provide opportunities for international medical students, residents, faculty, to come to the States to learn, and by the same token, to send our residents and our students and our faculty to other countries. And doing volunteer work, I think we've all done that. I had an incredible experience in Haiti, but also to understand developing academic collaborations and some of the things that we can get from other countries that we don't have here in the US. We've talked about innovation as the topic of today's session, and it's really amazing, especially with what's been going on now with big data and some specific organizations that are really taking the accelerator and the innovation and joint ventures to the next level. I want to give you an example of some consultative services that we've been doing, including some work in the Middle East, and then teleproctoring and telesurgery, not just being able to look at the image from the laparoscope or look at the image from the robot, but perhaps sitting there with the practitioner and being able to guide them from a distance as they're seeing patients. So let's talk first about international. So we have a very robust international patient program. In the last fiscal year at Cedars, we took care of 2,600 international patients from more than 100 different countries. Now, some of those were remote teleconsults, but many of those were patients that came to Los Angeles for their care. The largest region, not surprisingly, is North America, but when we look at the greatest income, it comes from the area of the GCC, or the Gulf Cooperative Council, which is the Arabian Peninsula outside of Yemen and includes Bahrain. our top specialties of why people were coming to us for specialty care: oncology, our cardiovascular surgery program, our transplant program, and then secondarily some internal medicine, orthopedics and spine. So it was a combination of both advanced surgical as well as advanced subspecialty care. And we have committed to do this in a way that's to the highest standards. So we have been accredited by the Global Healthcare Accreditation, which we just went through again last week. And again, if any of you in your own organizations are looking at that, I'd recommend it. It creates really a nice framework for the things that you want. Now, there's a lot of detail on these slides, and if any of you would like them, I'm happy to provide them to you. But when you think about getting a patient here and caring for them, there are multiple different aspects of that. Everything from understanding what the disease is, what their ability is to travel, how are they going to be able to be paid. In some cases, this is covered by the home country. In some cases, it's covered by the individuals. You then need to coordinate that care, and I think it's very important that you, before you bring somebody here, except in an emergency, that you, if possible, do some type of teleconsultation with the treating physician and the patient. And then once they come here, and especially if they are the means, the services need to be seamless. There needs to be, if English is not a primary language, to make sure that there are translators available, that visa issues are worked out, that the embassies are involved, and that culturally we also are very sensitive, for example, in many cases where families want to stay with the patient and care for them. How do we adapt to that, both from the room point of view and understanding what the hospital requirements are? And then once they've been completed, it's very important that you have continuity of care, and that continuity of care can be done by bringing them back to your home institution. It can be done by telemedicine. Increasingly, what we have been doing, especially in some of our busier areas, is our clinicians are traveling to the area, seeing patients there, both potential patients that would be coming back, as well as seeing follow-ups, because I don't think there's anything as good as that sitting next to your patient, touching them, and being able to have that. So those are sort of the gross aspects of what we try to do. Again, you want to meet patients' expectations. One of the things that we have created right next to the hospital in our medical office towers is an international lounge. And in there are, knowing who's there, we will have local and regional treats so that people feel that when they've come, they're not coming to a completely foreign country, and that there's a place that they're comfortable. And we have ambassadors, and those ambassadors we try to make sure are culturally competent for the patients that are coming. Now, the second aspect is that of academic collaborations. And we have a fairly robust way of bringing medical students, residents, and fellows to California. We have a little more of a challenge when we're bringing faculty over that want to actually clinically do something because of some licensing in California that you may not have. The other thing that I think is important, and you probably all of us are noticing this, is we all get that kind of one-off letter from a medical student that wants to come over, or a resident that wants to come over and get the experience and hopefully perhaps have the opportunity to train here. And we only have so much capacity, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we focus on when medical students come to visit us to make sure that the experience is really good for them. We also very strongly encourage bringing research scholars over. So these are, in many cases, there are Western-style medical schools that are either 4 years or even more, including some type of graduate work. And we will bring them over for 2 years and bring them between their interests and one of our researchers. That's usually covered by the home institution, and they can get a master's degree or begin their PhD work. And then, of course, how do we choose our residents, our faculty, and so on, to travel, to do experiences. And some of those may not be necessarily even clinical. We have a lot of our residents now that are very interested in entrepreneurship and innovation. And so part of, because that is a global aspect, part of what I will try to do is help them find perhaps an opportunity to go overseas and work in that space and understand how you bring things to market differently in Europe or the Middle East or in the Pacific Rim. So when we bring students here, there are really a couple of components. One is we need to have a pre-existing relationship. So we actually have entered into some specific relationships with medical schools throughout the world that includes a certain number of students that will come for 4-week rotations that we will arrange. It's important that those students are fluent in English, are among their better students, and that the institution also has some type of liability insurance set up on them. Again, it's unlikely that a student's going to get in a problem, but you're in the States, there's different liability aspects, and that the rotation will count toward credit for them. We do get the U.S. Embassy involved where that's necessary, and then we actually have a complete separate flow for visas, for observation, and so on. And we've identified a couple of support staff so that we want to make this as easy as possible. And then licensing, if people want to come over, we have been able to do that. If you are going to bring over a faculty or a fellow who's going to see somebody, I really recommend that it be for at least a year, maybe 2 years, depending on the licensing requirements in your state, and also for them to have a really good experience. So these are our current academic collaborations. You can see that they're pretty much all over. The big one that I've been involved with my work in the GCC is Khalifa, which is in Abu Dhabi. And we've brought over, at this point, about 5 to 10 students a year. They rotate for 4 to 8 weeks, and we have a relationship where we're then able to reimburse the hosting department for identifying a faculty member. And the students all have had incredible experiences. Tsinghua, which is one of the leading academic medical centers in Beijing, was interested in their students coming over for research experiences, so they sponsored those. And we also have worked with Sheba. We have one of their residents who spends their 3rd year doing surgery with us, and we were planning to send our residents there until the most recent issues came up. And then Seoul University, we have strong collaborations both on the research side and education, including some works in epigenetics, because we have a large Korean population in LA, and the ability to develop some collaborations there, looking at, for example, the differences in expression of gastric carcinoma in Korea versus 1st, 2nd, or 3rd generation Koreans living in the States. So those are the kind of things that are just really exciting when you start looking at, this isn't just a one-way, this is really it's a bilateral type of experience. So the big thing the last decade, I think, if anything, about how we exist in healthcare and the excitement, and Jock talked a little bit about robotics. We brought the first system into Rhode Island, and I remember the amount of work it took, but also the excitement in doing that. And what we're seeing, and I think this has been the biggest shift I've seen in the last 5 years, has been biocomputational medicine and big data. And the advantages of collaborating overseas and in the US is that in many cases, other countries have far better national databases developed than we do. And our chances to look at those databases, compare them to ours, there's a lot of work now on creating a language-neutral EMR, so we can extract things from patients no matter what the home language, I think is really exciting, and you really should be considering that. The second is overseas, Europe, Israel especially, some of the countries in the Pacific Rim have different rules for doing clinical trials. And if there is an innovation that you need to have a clinical trial to get preliminary data prior to your FDA approval, in many cases those are carried out not in the US, but doing the preliminary trials overseas. And then one of the things that we have really enjoyed, and I'll speak to you in a few minutes about our accelerator, is that we invite overseas countries to send various teams and various cohorts to work in our accelerator, to take their ideas, to use them to interact with the other. Normally our cohorts are 10 different companies. And that kind of cross-national fertilization creates a huge hybrid vigor, and we found it to be very, very helpful. This is our accelerator. We are in our 11th cohort. We normally take between 8 and 10 upstart companies. The companies usually are in valuations of the $5 to $10 million range. And the advantage to them is multiple. They get $100,000 from us, which is without any strings attached. They get to test out their products right across the street from the hospital. We also assign various experts to help them in that, as well as gives us the opportunity to get entry stakes with them if we see something that's useful. So very much helpful. And when we take that then to the next level is a place like Sheba. And I don't know if any of you have been to Sheba. It's one of the top 10 hospitals in the world, just outside of Tel Aviv, in Tel HaShomer, the city of health. It has about 2,000 beds and multiple different institutes, and a very innovative leadership that looks at technology and looks at being adaptable and so on is really the key. And with that, they developed ARC, which is their innovation arm, and it's not just about thinking about a couple of ways, a couple of new ideas. It's really creating a whole ecosystem of how do you take a clinician who has a good idea but really doesn't know how to commercialize that or how to scale that, and how do you create a very easy infrastructure for them to do that. And the other thing that's been helpful for them is that they've been able to bring quite a few companies now publicly. One of their early wins was Ventor, and Ventor was the early development of the percutaneous valve, which they now regret that they sold for only $325 million in 2009, and some other technologies that they've come up with. The other thing that they are committed to, and this is international, is called the future of hospitals. And the future of hospitals is saying what is, with the kind of things that we have now in technology, with remote monitoring of patients, with big data, with the ability to create clones and do research on those, what should we be doing to optimize healthcare? Because not all of it's going to be in the hospital, but how do we create hospitals that can monitor patients remotely so they can go home? And so the Future of Hospitals is a group. It's an international group. Our CEO, Tom Krislak, is a member of it. And what you'll see from that, and again, this is something that you may want to consider in your own institution, is that it's not just hospitals that are involved. There are carriers, there are governmental agencies, there's Deloitte, one of the consulting firms. So I think the way we need to start thinking globally is how do we share the data, recognizing that we are going to be resource constrained. We can't all keep growing at the rate or level that we are. And one of the things that they're doing, for example, is actually creating, if you want to put and embed a team near where all the innovation is, you'll have the opportunity to do that. Now, the third one is one that I have fallen into in the last few years in my new role as the Dean for our international programs, which is how can we take our knowledge and, if asked, go to other countries and help them build the kind of systems that they want to provide the highest quality care. Because the US brand still carries a lot. That's why people come to us. They also go to Germany, they go to other European countries, depending on location. But there's something about the US market. And so I think there's real opportunities for strategic market entry and areas such as hospital design and operations. And these are our consultative services. I'm not going to go into them in great detail, but that it's a broad range and it's what you want. And you have to think about this, I think, in what are the areas that we do a lot of, and what are some things that really take time and a great deal of effort to pull off. And the first is basic consulting. And these are short-term engagements, usually under a year, where there may be a specific problem. Somebody wants to develop a minimally invasive program. There may be some issues in expanding cardiovascular care. And we will engage with them, create a workflow that will help them. The second is affiliations. And these tend to be longer, up to about 10 years, where our brand name, Cedars-Sinai, is actually co-branded with their institution. Now with that comes the expectation that the level of care that you're going to be given is consistent with the Cedars-Sinai brand. And that, again, it's not something where somebody just comes up to us, and we've had people come and say, well, I'm opening a hospital, and I give you X millions of dollars for us to put the Cedars sign on it. And you know, that's a non-starter. You've got to think about the value of your brand. And so we actually have two of those. I'll talk to you about those in a minute. The fewer and fewer, and we aren't in those quite as yet, is actually managing an overseas hospital, and the names that jump to mind on that are, for example, the Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi, where if you're a Cleveland Clinic faculty member, it is highly likely that you may spend a year or two providing care in Abu Dhabi. The management is also employed by Cleveland Clinic. And then you get into joint ventures where you're building hospitals together and that type of thing. So this has actually been my sort of home away from home over the last 12 months. This is the View Hospital in Doha, Qatar. And it does not escape any of us the irony of a Jewish hospital working in a predominantly Muslim country. But I think getting back to what some of the earlier speakers discussed, healthcare is universal. And we want to provide the greatest care. In fact, a large number of Gaza patients are being treated at the View right now. The View is a 240-bed hospital. It is located just across from downtown Doha. And what we do is I'm the medical director there, and I work with their staff on developing service lines, quality and safety. We're working toward Joint Commission International accreditation. And we report back, and we have board members on their board, and we report back to our local board. So these are the kind of consultative things that we have throughout the world. We also set up patient offices in key areas such as Mexico City, in China, and we have both consultative as well as other engagements, including academic engagements with exchange of knowledge and residencies and research projects and so on. So the final thing is teleproctoring and telesurgery. I think the key here is, you know, I think we do tend to think more about sitting at your console or looking at the video feed and saying, you know, you need to go here or here. This is the gentleman on the far right is Dave Culver. Dave is one of our hand surgeons who's very committed to work in Mozambique. He's a plastic surgeon as well, sees a lot of burns. And this is the key, is that there is a surgical shortage, and we all recognize that. There's a deficit of about 2 million surgeons worldwide, and we can't all take our time and go out as much as we want to try to fix those problems. What we need to do, and we heard that from our previous speaker, is how do we train the next generation of surgeons for that country. And so this is his foundation, the Ohana Foundation. Caring for the patient helps one patient, but training the surgeon helps thousands of patients. I think we all agree with that. And I find this to be really cool. So this is essentially a heads-up display for any of you that are in aviation. It allows the consultant from a distance to see what the surgeon is seeing, and that could be a clinic, that could be in the OR, and it's a lot easier than the head-mounted cameras tend to get moved around a lot. What you're able to then do is, for example, if you're looking at creating a Z-plasty, from Los Angeles, Dave Culver can show the surgeon in Mozambique. This is, they're looking at the patient's hand, this is how I'd orient the scar and so on. And I think this holds a huge amount of opportunity. He's created a 501c3 and has been able to really scale this, and because we're in Los Angeles, he's gotten Annette Benning to be one of his spokesmen. So it's another way to think about how we're able to expand. We also bring their surgeons here for observation so that they can get a feel for what we do. So again, just another way of thinking about how we're able to influence at a distance, and at the same time do good. And whether that becomes any kind of a long-term relationship or any kind of financial relationship, you deal with that as a one-off. So I know that we've covered a lot of information, and I look forward to the discussions at the end of the session. But there, again, when you're thinking about service lines, there are really multiple things, and some of these may work better for you than others, including those of you that have traveled from overseas and developing collaborations with U.S., facilitating international patients, academic collaborations, incubators, accelerators, and joint ventures, consultative services if you have that bandwidth, and teleproctoring and telesurgery. So I'm really blessed that we have a huge team, and as you can see from the team, we also are very sensitive to make sure that the folks that are part of our team are culturally aware of the area that they're working. So we have folks that primarily concentrate on Europe and England. We have folks from the Pacific Rim, South America, and then the Middle East. And with that, we have a great leader, the gentleman third from the left, the tall guy with the beard is, I don't know if any of you know him, it's Haitham Hassoun. Haitham is a vascular surgeon. He's of Lebanese descent, but he first got interested in international medicine because his dad was with Aramco, and he was raised in the Aramco cities in eastern Saudi Arabia, and then went on to medical school and has a great understanding of that culture. He's very helpful, you know, for me, you know, a scrawny Jewish kid from Ohio, to try to understand some of those things, some of the better ways to deal with local cultures. So with that, once again, Dr. Vithianathan, thank you for this opportunity, and I also would like to express my appreciation to the International College of Surgeons for the privilege of the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Sachs, and we have a small token of appreciation. It says United States section honors Harry Sachs, MD, for presenting the 2024 Keynote Lecture, International Medicine Initiatives, a new opportunity for your institution. Awarded this 25th day of April 2024. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sachs. Let me present our next speaker. She's Ayesha, Khalid, Assistant Professor, Harvard Medical School. She's going to talk about digital health and surgical outcomes, hacking healthcare in Singapore and Qatar.
All right, no small acts to follow. Yep. You can tell I'm a Mac user. How's that? Oh, it's good on my screen, but not on yours. Sorry. I wonder if I need to lose this completely. Yeah, yeah. We're hacking the computer. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to present today. I'll try to keep it brief. This is my first visit to this esteemed organization, so thank you to Dr. Vithianathan for inviting me. I will say I had no idea that the talks before mine were so congruent with what I'm going to speak on. So we started with Benjamin Franklin, who essentially was a hacker and an entrepreneur, as he talked about his ophthalmologic lenses and creation. And then we had Dr. Fontaine, hope I'm saying that right, that spoke a lot about, the last bullet you had, surgical innovation really matters. And why do we need new technology? And I think technology, as I'll talk about real briefly, could potentially bend the cost curves that you showed in healthcare. And everyone else, and then Dr. Sachs really set this up well for me, because the reality is, as I speak about digital health and surgical outcomes, I'm essentially going to try to do a quick introduction to the hacking healthcare community around the world that I've been engaged with. But I think what Dr. Sachs brought up is we really can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And I feel that in healthcare, we certainly have a tendency to do what we're taught and trained. So my goal is to really change that for us. For my disclosures, I'm a consultant for these companies, but in no way do they impact anything in this talk. So let's start with what a hackathon is, right? So the word hack is a dirty word. It generally means like breaking into your data, or somebody's like gotten into your cell phone or your credit cards. But the reality is it comes from something which means a clever solution to a problem. And I think for everyone here, we're all trying to come up with clever solutions to people's healthcare needs. During my time doing my MBA at MIT, I chanced upon this hacking medicine community, and they really were teaching me that something that is very fundamental to engineering and computer science, which is the iterative process, is something that is not as easy for us to do in surgery. We can't really iterate our surgery or say, hey, we'll just try to do it a different way and see how that goes. But in the engineering community, they're often releasing beta versions of things, right? And then just testing and trialing. So I want to talk a little bit about what happens if you approach healthcare from starting with the problems or the needs as opposed to starting with the solution. So often, I'm going to walk you through an example of what we did with some of the work in Boston and in the US, and then I'll show you examples that we've done globally. We always start with the fact that you really have to map the journey from the eyes of the user, whatever that user may be. Sometimes it's the patient journey, as I'm showing, but starting from you don't feel well to you're sick, to you're in the emergency room, to you're getting an appendectomy, for example, from some of my general surgery colleagues, to going home and not understanding what the directions mean. So when we come to these events, these hackathons, and I'll show you some pictures and examples, we often say that the clinicians are almost the worst participants in the room, because we have a tendency to want to tell you what the answer is. And what we really want to do is show you what the solution, what the problem is first, and try to solve it. So as you think about all of the efforts in the global surgery community, you really want to answer what problem is the technology trying to solve? Is it a valid problem? In other words, I would challenge the assumption that we always want more robotic or more technology, and say, what does it help with? Or what need does that solve? We'll talk about that. A lot of times the challenges that have come up in the healthcare hackathons come from the fact that those of us that are coming to these events that are from outside of healthcare, so not us in the room, do not understand why so many of our interventions fail. So be it that we do a surgery and patients don't follow directions, or as this slide shows, take their medications as they're supposed to. The question is why? It's not that we didn't tell them, it's not that we didn't instruct them. So if you really get at the heart of that, you start to find out that many, many solutions have been made, but most of those solutions don't last. Compliance really drops when the patient isn't activated. So this is an old statistic, but the number has only grown. The amount of digital solutions for improving healthcare in the United States is in the thousands. Every company, every device, every pharma company has so many solutions, right? But the question is, how are they experientially? We're all very adept at using our iPhone or the apps that we like. How many of us want to get into like our MyChart and really look at the data, even for those of us that are in healthcare? So we come at it from a different perspective, which is, how do we reinvent healthcare experiences? How do you make it so that the patient or the patient's family is a little bit delighted, and you're able to create a sustainable company around that? So this is just showing, you know, a doctor's bag, which I didn't have, but I know some of my colleagues still do house visits, and there's something you carry, right? So let's use the stethoscope as an example. A stethoscope, if you think about it, and mind you, I'm an otolaryngologist and an ear, nose, and throat physician, so I can make fun because I actually don't remember how to use a stethoscope and haven't used one in a long time. But if you think about it from an engineering perspective, it's a really archaic tool, right? Because the part that's put on the patient has acoustics that in no way rival what your phone can do. And if you think about the part that you're putting in your ears, you're relying on your subjective hearing, and then you're recording data that someone else is then supposed to follow at the next visit. Well, what if you rethink about, oh, sorry, I jumped a few slides. What if you rethink about the fact that one of the companies that came out of these healthcare hackathons, and I'm providing examples in the interest of time rather quickly, is that you can put your phone on your forehead, and the light that's emitted from the capillary flow can actually measure the beat of the heart and pick up arrhythmias or EKG abnormalities. So the question becomes, that would do a few things. You could ask a patient to say, do this every day, versus let's put a monitor on you after cardiac surgery and see if you're still having arrhythmias, but the monitor is only 24 hours or 48 hours. It sort of changes the way that we're thinking about the way that technology is applied. So that's just one example. The main example that I want to talk through is one that I would say, I'm not going to talk about it because it's our biggest success story within the MIT HackMed community in the class that we teach, but I will say it's interesting because it started with a group of students that were in the class and a clinician. So they essentially showed up at one of the first healthcare hackathons in Boston about 8 or 9 years ago, and one of them was a pharmacist, one of them was a surgeon, one of them was a business student. The pharmacist and the surgeon did not trust the business student. I think that usually happens, right? There's a little bit of a friction there. But the pharmacist said, my dad, and this is just a rendition, not his real dad, but my dad has a lot of pills that he has to take on a daily basis. And it's hard for him to know when to take these pills or how to take them. And so over the course of the weekend, they basically came up with the rough sort of idea, what if you had a toilet paper roll type of thing, where you just peeled the strips, and you can see on the top right, this is the end solution that they used, and it's been a little bit iterated since then, and there's many, many companies like this now, mind you, but essentially, my dad's tablets can be in this packet every day labeled with what's in it, what's the dose, instead of what patients tell us, which is after surgery I've been using your red pill, but I haven't been using your white pill. And I don't know which pill they mean. So this sort of eradicated that. Now, this entire company was raised both in the venture capital that it raised, the business model that it created, the way that it sold to patients and consumers based on experience. Every time a patient signs up for our mail order service from PillPack for the last 6-7 years until about 3 years ago, they would essentially say, I need you to take care of my mom's medications. I'm willing to pay extra. I want you to have those mailed to my house, and I want to make it easy. It sounds like too simple, right? It sounds like it would be incredibly silly and maybe not as successful as the CVS model of handing out medications. But how many of you love going to CVS and waiting for your prescriptions, for those of you that are in the US? Whoever raises their hand, I'd like to speak to you afterwards. But that pain point that the patient wanted their symptoms to be under control and be able to take their medication became huge. And I'll tell you why. Because using that example, using that patient experience, we started to build a framework. And what happened with PillPack is we did the same process with that team. In fact, the student on the team was the teaching assistant for the course, but is now a multi-millionaire, so he is no longer the teaching assistant for the course. We'll talk about that in a second. And here's the list of questions we came up with. So anytime you're with a group, an innovative group like this, and you're back at your institutions and you think, well, what's our goal? Our goal is to improve what? The quality of what? Access to what? Have people just fill it in and write it out, because we tend to be a group that is super passionate and super smart, and we want to deliver really good patient care. but we're often too broad, and we need to really narrow. So to give you an example, this was the story that was told for PillPack. Like, this is literally their original, what they did over the course of a weekend, and then created that toilet paper roll. So all we want to do is manage multiple medications. We want a better experience. We want it on time. It's usually going to be for people that are taking multiple medications. And notice they did not pick the older dad as the customer. They actually picked an activated patient that's younger, because they said we want to start with someone who's already very comfortable with technology. I'll skip to the end in terms of the story. PillPack encountered a lot of friction. So in the last, until 2 years ago when they sold, they were not important until they were. They found out that pill counting in many small pharmacies is done by eyeballing how many pills are in the bottle instead of automation. So they introduced automation into medication delivery. They found out that CVS was really annoyed by them, and CVS actually went to the legislature and Congress and said, we would like small companies to be banned. But what they didn't count on, and the reason I'm telling the story, is because many of the senators and congresspeople in Congress had had some of their family members using PillPack, and they loved them. So remember what I said about patient experience? They said, we want our mom or our sister or our sick child to really be able to get their meds. And so I'm picking on CVS because it's a true story, but I'm sure it would be the same for any large retail pharmacy. CVS said we could do a better job, and Congress said, you know what, the field is wide open. Healthcare is now wide open. Pharmacy retail ranks in 50 out of 50 on consumer experience. Like, it's like the most terrible. We're gonna let PillPack play. Interestingly, CVS tried to buy PillPack several years later, and they sold to Amazon for nearly $1 billion, hence our TA is no longer our TA. But that being said, with that type of experience, the question becomes, where can you take that? So the two places I'll talk about really quickly. One is Singapore. So aging in place, that was a hackathon that we had a few years ago. And whenever you do a healthcare hackathon, you want to do it with a very specific theme in mind. And for Singapore, the population is aging. There's not a very high birth rate. There's quite a burden on younger folks to take care of aging uncles, mothers, fathers, sisters, siblings. And there were, as I learned, not a lot of assisted living or nursing home facilities. People want to age in their home. So the name of that hack was Aging in Place. And when we got there, our goal was, all right, let's gather a bunch of people in the room. It'll be patients and consumers. It'll be computer scientists. It'll be designers. It'll be healthcare practitioners within the country. And then we'll bring some tools to prototype. And you can see in the photos that, like, you start with paper prototyping, and then you basically move on to, like, building apps. And in the end, what were our outcomes? Well, we found out a few things. One, no older person wants to wear a wearable and be tracked by their child. So we had the hackers do user interviews. Yes, someone's laughing. Okay, good, I like it. We had them, a lot of the young people at the event said, well, I'm sure my mom would want to wear this Fitbit so I can keep track of her all times of the day and know exactly what she's doing. We said, great, why don't you call your mom and your grandma and an aunt and a friend? They said, oh, nobody wants to be tracked. But what they do want is some peace of mind that their loved one's okay. So one of the ideas that really got iterated was a foot mat. So if you put this at the kitchen sink or the bathroom sink and you track that somebody actually comes and walks around, you can measure their balance, you can measure the frequency, you can do the same with motion sensors, which feels a little creepy, but you are doing it letting people know that this stuff's there. And if an entire day goes by and there hasn't been movement, then you know that something's wrong. And it may be that they've fallen, but it actually, we found out the biggest indicator of older folks not doing well was loneliness. So the winner of this particular hackathon was an app that just created a social support group for people to get to know other people that lived in their communities that were older. So, you know, that's one example, Podiometrics. And then Podiometrics is actually, one of the founders lives in Boston. It's a pretty big company right now. And then the other place, and I'm laughing because Doha has already come up a few times today that we've done a hackathon, is Qatar. And that one was because they wanted to do something around fitness, the obesity epidemic, the high rate of diabetes, and they wanted to call it exciting, so it was like a sports medicine hackathon, and they said, you know, people here have all of the state-of-the-art facilities, the gyms, the indoor malls with like walking areas. Dr. Sachs is nodding because he's seen all of it, but they're empty. And so what is gonna make this work? And I'll give you guys one anecdote. So one of the organizers of the hackathon with us in Doha, she loves to bike ride. But when she's wearing like a full hijab and she's trying to bike ride, imagine trying to bike ride and then even like the dress part's getting caught in the pedals. So we had to think about healthcare is not about handing her a Fitbit or making her eat better. It's just an ability for her to be able to ride the bike along the water but still conform to how she wants to dress. So that taught us that you have to go a little bit beyond what's in the hospital or in the home and really think about that. So that was one of the things that came out of the Doha hackathon. But the other key takeaway, this is actually a photo of the team. I won't get more into this, but all of these hackathons are volunteer events. All of the students, clinicians, computer scientists, mentors, all volunteer for free. Sometimes people can have travel paid for, and that's about it. We found that gamification, telling children to be healthy is one thing, but gamifying it, maybe involving some celebrities in soccer or, as we call it in the rest of the world, football, bringing them to the stadiums, showing them that it's a really fun sport because they've built so much state-of-the-art stuff, especially prior to the Olympics, is really, really important, and is something that, you know, they hadn't thought of, and they were just sort of ramming it down the people's throats, and they weren't, you know, getting interested. So that was an example of what you can do to prevent the need for more consumption of healthcare and maybe the need for more consumption of surgery. So I want to leave you guys with this message. I think it's amazing that I'm giving this talk sort of in the middle and it's already been talked about, but if you ever get the chance to volunteer or mentor at a healthcare hackathon, I think it would be amazing. Your expertise in your field is so invaluable to the students that want to work in healthcare. The team on the right is actually all of the mentors that flew to the Singapore hack. There was one in Indonesia, the one in Doha, and we all work in different parts of healthcare. We're all different types of physicians, and it's really made it so that it's a community. This is a photo at our MIT hack a couple of years ago that just happened last weekend. The last thing I'll say is we bring kids, so it's a great place. You can bring your family. So my daughter's in the middle, and she's 20 now, so that's kind of an old picture. But at the end of the day, you want your whole community to get involved, right? Our goal is to do really good surgery and provide really good care, but actually our goal is to keep people healthy. So doing that better is sort of our passion and mission. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid. That was a great presentation and new ideas for the surgeons.